Hey, good evening. Welcome to the St. Mary's Sustainable Farm. I'm Chris Cobb. I'm the farm director here, and this is Matthew Insley. Matthew is the farm manager here. So you might say I have primary responsibility for the paperwork, and Matthew has primary responsibility for everything else. This is the good stuff. So we're delighted that you are joining us here at the farm this evening. We're looking forward to showing you around, talking about some of the things that we're doing. I'll begin just by giving a real brief overview. Physically, we are growing on 2 acres. The area that's surrounded by the deer fence that you can see in the background is about 2 acres of land. We have about 2/3 of an acre under direct and active cultivation right now. This is our first year of growing at this scale. Before this growing season, none of the growing beds that you're seeing now were here. This has all been installed primarily by Matthew himself, but with help from volunteers and interns over the course of the year. From the time he got started bed building, putting in some last fall, and then through the spring, and then here now. So one of the things that we are in a position to share is being in the middle of a starting up process, what it's like to start out, trying things, seeing what works, what doesn't work, a lot of learning, a lot of experimenting at this stage in our process. So this is 2 acres, 1 year old. Those are our basic vital statistics. And we've been working at St. Mary's to bring this farm to fruition for about 7 years. And 5 years of just planning and preparing the soil. Then 2 years with our first farm manager doing small scale, entirely non-mechanized growing as kind of a proof of concept. And then when our initial farm manager was ready to retire, move on to other things, we decided it was time we were ready to step up our operations, and we connected with Matthew, and here we are.
So we talk about having 3 pillars as a part of our mission. First and foremost, I suppose, is education. So we're at a college, and so we're trying to do education. But of course, like when we say we want to educate, what does that mean? And so we're not really growing necessarily trying to produce like market gardeners or people that are going to go do this professionally necessarily, right? But we're trying to expose our students to any number of concepts and just the materiality of this place. And I think in and of itself, that's very much educational. So, college students don't always get the opportunity to be outside enough. And so this is a real, a place of learning in so many different ways. But we also were able to incorporate lots of different disciplines. So there's, the biology department, and there's, even theology, philosophy coming out and talking about the good life, what does it mean to be responsible for production? All the way to our art teacher who's involved. We can show you the dye garden that we have, that she actually grows dye plants and then utilizes those with her students. So there's a lot of really neat things. Then secondly, we talk about wanting to practice spirituality here. So at St. Mary's, as a Catholic school, is a Laudato Si, or striving to be a Laudato Si community, I think. And so the Pope, wrote this encyclical about caring for creation. And so we're trying to embody that and help the women and others who come here to think about what it means to be a disciple, one that's responsible for caring for creation. And also we think of it as, I guess, in that spirituality realm, just a place of healing and of mental health. That's a real need right now, and we find that it works wonders when students come out and use their hands and breathe fresh air, put their hands in the dirt.
Yeah, we often have students who just come out to look at the chickens. They just come out and they watch the chickens.
That's right. And then lastly, we want to produce food. So now part of our mission is to address food insecurity in the community by actually producing some amount of food. So for instance, we don't just have 20 chickens, we have 175, so that we can have 50 or 60 dozen eggs a week to give away to the community. So it's a part of St. Mary's mission, actually, to basically be in actually producing some amount of food. And so right now we have approximately we have two or three different distribution places. We distribute our food through kind of like a CSA model a little bit. We take our food down, and we have about 30 families that we're working with to do that. And then on Fridays we have a small market here on campus where we set out our veg and people come, and we've been seeing 75 or 100 people come to that. So that's been kind of neat.
It's exciting.
And then we anything that's left over we take to a local food kitchen. So education, spirituality, and production, I guess.
Yeah, and sustainable regenerative practices underlying each of those aspects, that we want educationally to be able to show students what a sustainable food system looks like, and to give them the experience of participating in that here at the farm, in the production of food, in the dining hall, where they're collecting food waste that we're bringing out here to feed to the chickens or to put directly into the compost, and then in the distribution of food to people who need it. Because that's one thing that maybe doesn't get talked about enough with sustainable food systems is it needs to feed people. And it's not just, to be sustainable, it's not just, the college, which is a place where people already, for the most part, have good food access. But if the system is to be sustainable, it needs to be making sure everybody is fed. And so the relationships that we have with the food pantry and the soup kitchen are about taking account of the way in which food needs to move through the community in order for a system to be truly sustainable, to sustain us.
Is any of the food going into the cafeteria? Or?
It's not right now.
There are a couple reasons for that.
Go ahead.
One is that the cafeteria is feeding 1,400 students every day. We're not growing on a scale where we can supply food that meaningfully contributes to that enterprise. If we tried to do that, like we could grow, if the groundhogs didn't get it, we could grow all carrots, and then there'd be enough carrots for the dining hall, but all we'd have is carrots, which is not a good ecological growing model. And it's not going to help students to see what a sustainable system would look like.
Well, I'd say it's pretty impressive for your first year here, Matt. Yeah.
Well,
how much time are you putting into the garden?
I'm contracted for 32 hours a week, and I'm full-time, 12 months.
Yeah.
So.
And he's probably not working more than twice that many hours a week.
I was going to say, that's pretty...
So we're... It takes a lot of time, and there's always like the ebbs and flows of the season too. So certainly more this time.
Curve stage.
So we can keep walking, but we're definitely happy with our chicken situation. We move them around, every week or whatever to different spots, and
you can see the coop.
Comes from it's been used by several different local farmers. I'm at least the third person who's used it. So.
One thing, since we're looking at the chickens, where the chickens are now is they're really working in our nutrient cycling. And the mound there, that it began as leaves from the campus that were collected and then dumped out here. And this is about the second year that leaf pile has been there, and it's turning to soil, and it got grown up pretty heavily with weeds. So we brought the chickens over here, and they've cleared all of the area around the coop of weeds now, and they're working on the mound. It's a lot. They haven't stripped it yet, and so we're probably going to leave them around until they finish that job. But they've taken a lot of the weeds out. They're enjoying the tall grass. They often just shelter under the coop during the heat of the day, but they like to bed down among the grasses now, and their droppings are coming in there, so they're getting into our nutrient cycle there by they're actually foraging on our future compost.
Mm-hmm.
So
and we'd like to dial this in and get a whole system going eventually in terms of making compost with our chickens, doing a lot of food recycling. But one of the things that I think has been really exciting is how we've been able to capture waste from the dining hall, actually, and like they've probably eaten just in the last week, hundreds of pounds of food waste, and it's been neat. And for me too, it's the opportunity for education, right? So our students are seeing that, they're starting to understand. We got student leaders who are giving leadership in that, helping other students understand.
We had volunteers out here for about 10 different hours a week during the academic year, and we would have, anywhere from 3 to 10 students here for those hours. We estimate that we had probably, between the students who were caring for the chickens and the students who were working at the farm, who came out for classes, we probably saw around 150 different students out at the farm over the course of last year, not counting the students who came out as some part of a class activity. We felt, particularly for our first spring of operation, because we think we're going to see a lot more of them when they come back out, and they were building beds, and moving compost around. It was hard work, a lot of the volunteer work in the springtime, and they don't see the results, but they're going to come back in the fall and say, okay, and we're saying, Thursday is our harvest day. We want to get a lot of volunteers out on Thursday morning. I think when the students who were volunteering in the spring, building these beds, come out and see all the food that's coming out of them, that's going to be a very exciting experience for them. And each season, because the seasons where we have most students around are not the seasons when the most farm work is happening. Like May is the busiest time of year, and end of April the students are basically gone for a month. You can't get students on the farm in the month of May pretty much at all, and so that's a challenge that we need to figure out.
So this is our dye garden, which I think is one of the coolest things about the farm. Just that I think this was something that kind of a light bulb went off for me when I was talking with Julie Tortelot in the fall when I first started, and we were just talking about what she was kind of tending to her small little dye garden that she had, and I said, well, you just let me know what you want me to grow for you and we'll do it. And she was talking to me about kind of all the things that she does, and I just realized, like, oh, one of my jobs here is going to be a resource for teachers, right? What do you want to teach? What do you want them to learn? What do you want them to know? How can I help facilitate that? So there's everything: Japanese indigo, madder and weld, and dyer's chamomile, rudbeckia. There's marigolds, and I have a few herbs in here, but then more marigolds and cosmos, and then Hopi black dye sunflowers. I mean, it's just like so cool to.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's beautiful, right? And yeah, it adds beauty to the garden. So I think another aspect, I suppose we wanted to touch on some was design, right? So I have just the slightest background in permaculture design, and but when I first approached this question, well, what kind of garden do we want? Where do we want to do with this space? And so it's sort of designed as a market garden would be in a certain sense. We have 30-inch beds and 18-inch paths, 4 feet on center, and we have blocks of 11, and you can see this is one block, and then there's another block, and so we can rotate our crops and so forth. So I think that's what I was familiar with in terms of production. If we really wanted to produce food, I thought, okay, we're going to implement some market garden strategies. But I realized, like, it can't be, and it shouldn't be just straight, carrots and beans, because this is also a place that it really needs to, if we're doing spirituality, if we're doing restoration, soul work, it needs to be a place of beauty.
One thing I'll just say, we can see really clearly with the dye garden here, but the patterns are there in the other beds as well, are both that there's one strip of flowers in every bed running through. We're also trying to plant some tall things, particularly on the western sides of the beds, to provide a windbreak. And beyond the sunflowers, we have permaculture strips at the edges of the farm where we're planting berries and then some plants that are just there for pollinators, that we're looking to have a kind of a woody hedge on the west side that will be another windbreak. That this site, and you can really see this feature of the site clearly from this spot, we're surrounded on 3 sides by several hundred acres of production agriculture. And so that means that there's really nothing in any location that's meaningful to break the wind. And wind is a big issue for plant health and for infrastructure on this site. One other thing that you can see here about the design of the site that we should talk about is the space between the fence and the corn rows. That space is designed as a buffer zone to let the it's a space for herbicides and pesticides to settle out before they get to our growing beds. And we're in the process of establishing a native grass planting all the way around the farm because the grasses won't be harmed. We've been working on getting that land ready for that planting for several years now, so I'm excited to be finally on track for sowing those seeds this winter. They're sitting in boxes in my office now. But we found from this growing season that although this 125-foot buffer is what was presented to us as being an appropriate scale, we are still having trouble with drift. And so that's something we're going at. We're still, working out how are we going to deal with that. What is some level of pesticide pollution on the site going to mean for what we can grow? So Matthew, how did you build these beds, and how do we get our compost and get these beds in?
Yeah, well, we used a variety of resources. So when I came, there were huge piles of compost that was mostly leaf litter, I think, and so. Yeah. They were just decomposed leaves of different generations, some older than, more broken down than others. And so I felt like the site needed an injection of organic matter, so I just started dumping. Organic matter onto these plots, and so that was step number one for a lot of these. We also had chickens running over some of this in the fall, and that was a good little start in terms of boosting fertility and doing a little bit of eradication of some sod. I also have the BCS there that I can use to break in spaces. And then we have kind of been practicing at times. We try to practice the deep compost method that you'll see, Singing Frog or some of these other farms are making popular, sort of a no-till method. We are certainly not no-till here, but we are striving to be as low-till as we can be going into the future, mostly so we don't have so many weeds, and because it's a good practice ecologically. But so what we do is we'll do the compost 6 or 8 inches deep, especially if I'm going to direct seed something. I try to make that happen, just because it's so clean, So I just did these 2 in salad, and they had been composted 6 or 8 inches deep, and just go straight in with something, and then instead of tilling them or doing anything, I just raked them down and seeded them again this time. So that's kind of how we've used a lot of different methods, but essentially I'm kind of a believer in adding as much organic matter as you can. And
so Matthew, I think what I heard you say was you have 11 rows?
Yeah, 11, so beds and blocks, yeah. The beds are 30 inches and the path is 18.
And there's 11 in each block?
11 in each block.
And how many blocks are you maintaining?
12 blocks, I think.
Wow.
They're 50 foot long, so we're not growing in all 12 blocks right now yet.
Okay. I was gonna say.
But and certainly, as you can tell, Chris and I talked about this a little bit. I think that my goal in some ways was to make a bold move, to make a bold stroke, and then to build a container and then try to figure out how we're going to fill it up.
I have a question about your setup and mechanical.
Sure.
When you're bringing compost in, what do you use?
Yeah. So one of the great things about farming here has been the resources. So not only guys in maintenance to do fixes. If I break something, I'm like, Alberto, how do I fix this? But they have a huge shop up there, and they also have a dump truck, which is something I never had before. And it's like the best thing I've ever in the world. So you can see in terms of design too, I did make this a little spacious. So I think some people in a city, like an urban context, or maybe a different kind of context where they're trying to be super efficient with space. One thing I found in my old place is that I hated not being able to get around in it. And I love to be able to move at least somewhat comfortably. So I made spaces where I can turn a tractor around at the end and where I can drive in a dump truck actually onto the head of my beds. So I'm close with the compost, so I'm not walking too far. So what I'll do is lay out a tarp, I go to the city, get weed-free, really good compost that they've just really stepped up their game. They make really good stuff now. And I can get a couple yards at a time, go get it, the dump truck, dump it here. And then I literally use 5-gallon buckets, actually. I like the precision of buckets. You can use wheelbarrows, but we do 2 5-gallon buckets right on top of each other. Usually, I think it takes 75 or 80 buckets maybe to do a 50-foot row, and I use a bedrick, the Jang. So like I said, I like to do that process for anything that I'm going to direct seed. It can be a bottleneck because of all the labor that it takes. The compost is $5, and it's not an issue in terms of money,
Right.
but it's in terms of the labor that it takes to do that. So if I've got some weeks I'm like, I have 2 beds of carrots and beets and 2 salads, and I'm like, oh, I have to build five of those. It's like that's a lot. So just getting started that's been a bottleneck for us.
I mean, we can get over here and admire our our wood chip collection, which is gonna keep us for a long time. I guess looking forward into the future, where those wood chips are now is a place where we eventually envision having a farm building. That's a multi-use building, so that we can have classes can really meet out here. That's another thing that would be important. If we had a building where we could meet a class in all weathers, that would make it a lot easier for us to have a farm-based class. And then we're looking to put in a hoop house. We have a grant actually from the Sisters of the Holy Cross. We're deeply grateful to put in a big hoop house over our tomato beds there, which is going to be a project for this fall. And that'll help to extend our growing season.
There's this debate, I don't know how you all feel, but I'm a wood chips in the path guy, because I think it's really comfortable. So again, like, we make some choices for different reasons. I think it's very comfortable. I think it looks nice. And also I love that it promotes fungal life and brings that balance. So here you can see this is kind of what eventually, right? It'll look kind of like this, hopefully.
We did a sequence of cover cropping on this ground for over 2 years in the process of preparing it, and the last cover crop was white clover. And so all of in the southern half of the site, which we did in that method, we have a nice clover, primarily clover bed for all of our paths. The northern area got added in later, and we never got to the clover cover crop. So the last cover crop we had on that was rye and vetch. So right now we've got vetch and mare's tail up there. So one of the things we'd like to do sometime in the next couple of years is work on the paths in the northern half and get them tilled and then seed clover, so that we can have something that's nicer and more mowable on the northern half as we do on the southern half.
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
On your landscaping cloth,
Mm-hmm.
do you move that every year? Or will you move that every year?
Yeah, so some of these, like the perennial, I won't on these perennial strips, but like on those are that's one of my blocks, and yeah, I'll move that along with
So
those
you'll
peppers.
rotate.
Mm-hmm. I'll rotate it, yeah. And then this will be blueberry. You can see we got some in last fall, but this fall we'll get all of this in blueberries probably. So
We really appreciate your tuning in to visit us at the Sustainable Farm at St. Mary's College this evening, and especially our in-person audience has come out to do this video with us. We're really grateful for the opportunity to spend this time with you, and just to recap some of the things that we hope you're going to take away from the video is how a project can work that has a mission that is educational, spiritual, community related, and grounded in ecological growing practices, are all seeking to develop an operation here that enables us to integrate the academic mission and the growing mission, navigating the opportunities and the challenges that are created by having the growing calendar and the academic calendar being quite different in the way they work, but having to be synergized for the farm to achieve those goals that we have for it. So thank you very much, and have a great day.